Geek Tank Radio, News Talk 98.9, the roar of Memphis.
Welcome, everyone. We are the Geek Patrol, and our microphones don't have a stun setting. This episode of Geek Tank Radio is brought to you by Pile Drivers Violin School. Who says you can't learn classical music and dangerous wrestling moves all at the same time? Body slam your lack of culture away at Pile Drivers Violin School. Sounds about right, Allan. I mean, after you try to hit those chords for all those hours, you want some release, man.
There's nothing quite like taking your violin teacher and body slamming them to the canvas.
Very therapeutic.
There you go.
Good business model.
Do
you
they
guys.
have a piano version of this? Because I'd very much like to learn piano through this way.
Oh,
Absolutely. So welcome to Geek Tank Radio, everybody. So it's Joe Thorderson here with my buddy Allan Gilbreth and our pal Max, the producer behind the glass. Brandon is not here. I don't know what he's doing. Brandon is kind of useless in October. I'm just going to say it.
He is permanently on assignment.
Well, here's his thing. He was born in October, as he loves to always remind us. He is exactly as old as Star Wars, down to within a couple months. And so if you're ever wondering how old Brandon is, just look at when Star Wars, the first Star Wars
he's
came out.
He's a 70s baby.
And then, of course, he spends the full, really, starting in July, he starts getting ready for the month of Halloween, because that's what it is. It's the month of Halloween.
All right, Joe, let's just say, the first time you met Brandon and he told you he did arts and crafts.
Yeah, you thought, okay, so he's drawing flowers on canvas.
You went, okay, he puts Cupid dolls on furniture or something. Instead, what is Brandon's idea of arts and crafts, Joe?
Yeah, he uses resin, and he makes these replica masks from Halloween. So they're hockey masks with various stages of blood, gore.
Decorates hockey mask.
Yeah, that's his therapy.
That should tell you a lot right there.
And as long as we're fully throwing Brandon under the bus, the way he's a horror guy, and the way he relaxes is him and his wife go on, when they go on vacation, they don't go to some beachfront hotel. They go to a cabin in the woods.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
And the best part is, none of that was putting him under a bus. That was putting him on a pedestal.
I just wonder how you relax when all I'd be thinking about is what's coming through the screen, what's climbing out of the lake.
it's not what, who.
Right. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how he does it. Brandon's a unique
Brandon
character.
has his version of that. I enjoy the quiet weekend at the cabin in the woods also. Mine just comes with recipes.
Yeah, because you've got the shotgun and a cooking pot. So, anyway, hey guys. So speaking of that, with that in mind, Allan, expect regular Halloween-themed discussions throughout the month of October. So, Allan, in a bit, you and I are going to weigh in on that. I don't know. Let's maybe dive into some Halloween history. There's the veil thins in October, and we're going to explain kind of what that means too. So, before we get to that though, I had a breakthrough, Allan, with the What If series, and I realized what's bugging me, not just with What If, but what's bugging me with Loki. And here's the thing: far be it for me to just be a complainer or a whiner or whatever, but and I don't want to be negative, but I feel like I put my finger on what's bothering me about these, and let me back up by comparing what's going on in, what phase are we in here? Phase 4 for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, something like that. To me, it's like phase 2. It's like we had pre-Infinity War and post-Infinity War. That's
basically, we have exhausted all of the 60s, 70s, and 80s major storylines.
Okay.
So thinking about who's making the movies.
Right.
These are the people that are going to be in their 40s, 50s, and 60s that are now in charge of the studios.
Yeah, they grew up reading the
comics.
comics.
So when you
and
say
they get to
Spider-Man, they think Doc Ock. When you say Thor, they think Thor versus big stony monster, Odin, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Comic books haven't been like that in 30 years.
I'd even say longer, but yeah, you're right. The 80s, they haven't been the same since the 80s, in my opinion. But
no.
we know that's my favorite time. The late 80s, early 90s were my favorite comics, and of course, when I was a kid, growing up, I'd say early 70s were good. But well, here's what it is, Allan. So basically, you've got so really all of the Marvel movies before Infinity War, they had a very subtle theme. I wouldn't say it's subtle, but it was an interconnecting theme, and that was more or less the Infinity Stones.
Right.
you might see a reference to that, and it might even only be in the post-credit scene. But if you go back and watch those movies, there's a certain interconnectedness between that. Even in the first Captain America movie back in the 40s, he's dealing with he's dealing with an Infinity Stone and everything. And so they set it up, but they set it up, I feel, differently than what they're setting up here. And how's this? I'm setting up the next segment because that's what we're going to talk about.
I've noticed that you won't yell spike. You just keep bouncing the ball back and forth.
Well, this is what I've noticed, so this is kind of the fundamental thing I'm having with What If and with Loki and maybe some of the lesser projects they're doing. But maybe my beef has to do with the setup of how they're doing this, the interconnected themes and all of that. And so we're going to weigh in on that before when we come back from the break too. But Allan, I do feel like one of the things that's sort of odd to me here on Geek Tank Radio, you know what a big Harry Potter fan I am.
You might have mentioned Harry once or twice.
We don't give the books or any of that nearly enough time. And I thought, as long as we're here in the month of October, later in the show, let's also unpack let's show Harry Potter a little love. Let's talk about that. And don't roll your eyes at me, Allan. I know your feelings. Okay, anyway.
All I got to say, there were some tasty recipes in there.
So what I did here, folks, if you notice, I set things up. We'll see if I set things up as well as Marvel did. But anyway, we're going to come back, discuss my beef with What If and Loki and the new direction of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You're listening to Geek Tank Radio here on News Talk 98.9 The Roar of Memphis. We'll be right back.
Geek Tank Radio. News Talk 98.9, The Roar of Memphis.
He's talking to you, Allan. And welcome back to Geek Tank Radio. I'm Joe Thorderson here with my buddy Allan Gilbreth and our pal Max behind the glass. Brandon is not here. Brandon is shirking his duties. Brandon's out celebrating his birthday, and for some reason, he can't
Brandon ain't giving you 3 thoughts today, dude.
I don't know, man. Brandon moves in his own way. He moves in mysterious ways.
It is October. It is his month. He is Johnny on the spot for 11 months of the year, and he just gets it all out of his system in October.
Well, you better be back here next week, Brandon, because we've got the month of October is really, that's your month. You and Brandon have been ready for this since the spring. You've been talking about getting ready for Halloween. And
I started getting ready for Halloween on November 1st.
Yeah,
absolutely. What you're talking about.
The veil thins, which we're going to get in. We're going to talk Halloween because it is October itself is an interesting month. So I'm going to just get my griping out of the way, and then we'll move along to sunnier subjects,
okay.
Allan. But I finally had a revelation, and I figured out what is bothering me about the show What If, and what's bothering me about the show Loki, and some of the other things I'm seeing in the pipeline regarding the and actually you could even say this is probably going to play out a little bit in the No Way Home, the new Spider-Man movie. And so we were talking before the break about how in all of the Marvel movies before Infinity War, the big setup and the big underlying theme was Infinity Stones, setting up for the Infinity War and Endgame. And I have to say, I was even skeptical about that, but they did it. They did it brilliantly. They pulled it off. They had a 10-year story arc, which is unheard of, between like 22 movies. But I think the problem I have with this is that story, that interconnected storyline was very subtle, and it started to build up to a crescendo as you got into some of the later Avengers movies, and then it really built up and had the big payoff in Infinity War and in Endgame. Well, it's clear that in this new phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the big thing is this interconnected the multiverse. And there's going to be trouble with the multiverse. And I feel like the setup, it's just too heavy-handed. Like, there's nothing subtle at all. It's clearly what's going on is there's going to be something that's going to either, connect these or whatever, but it's right in your face. Maybe that's what's bugging me. It's not the slow rollout like you get. Like even in Harry Potter, I think the way they rolled it out was much slower and more sophisticated and just more, So that's it. I don't see the same nuances. So
Okay, well, first off, you also aren't seeing all the missteps.
okay,
Because of, let's see, the MCU technically gets started with Blade. The first big Marvel movie that actually, like, put some money in their pocket.
Yeah,
but that
you can't
wasn't technically an MCU.
Yeah, I feel like
So
you got to
then-
start with Iron Man and Captain
Then
America.
next you got Ang Lee's Hulk, which is another travesty of comic book movies. And then there was like some Fantastic Four stuff, and then there's kind of this X-Men thing going over on the side. So a lot of the storytelling and getting you stirred up had already begun. It's not until we actually get to of Captain America and Iron Man 1
right.
that we really get a feel that, oh, there's going to be a story here as to why these characters should know each other.
Yeah.
Well,
and there's a big underlying thing that's
All right,
brewing.
well, you've now had 22 years, and they're not going to do that kind of setting up anymore.
You mean movies? Yeah.
You've had 22 years. Years.
I'm not okay. Go ahead. I'm not counting things the same way as you are because I'm talking about an interconnected story.
All right, you
arc,
do
but-
understand that your children that you were diapering during Iron Man 1 are now driving.
That was only okay. I don't want to talk about diapering my kids, Alan. Once again, Alan's meandering in. Okay,
No,
I'm
I'm just showing you the length of time that we have been talking about here. If you look at one or two really good movies a year, moving and advancing the MCU, this has been well over, in the exciting part, a decade of movies.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, so you're not going to get another round of subtle setups. You've already got an entire generation of setup. Marvel now is just going to get out the big brush and go, boom, here we go.
I feel like that's a misstep, personally. I mean, I feel like for one thing, okay, I'm watching What If, and the Watcher, well, he actually finally did something this week, which was interesting. But I'm like, okay, I don't really know if I'm the rookie, like, because to be honest, I never really cared about the Watcher in the comics,
Right.
so I don't know a lot about what his powers are, why he's even doing what he does, what his job is, or anything. I barely get any of that, and all of a sudden, Ultron crashes through the Mirrorverse or whatever, and they're fighting, and I'm like, I don't feel invested.
All I got to say is 10 rings, hundreds of millions of dollars.
If you don't mind, my guys, kind of like I'm changing the subject here. I wanted to kind of talk about like why the setup for these shows are a little bit more abrupt than the ones that we were kind of growing up with, like back with like Iron Man 1, you know?
Okay.
My opinion is that we needed those movies to set up like these characters that are unfamiliar to us. Like we're not just setting up a whole arc for like a storyline with like the Infinity Stones, but we're setting up the origins of all these characters. But like now all the characters are out there and everything, and so now we're just setting up new storylines, new plot lines that these characters encounter. Well, the ones that are living, that is.
Yeah, well, okay. Here's my thing though, because I'm gonna compare this to Harry Potter, because sometimes, dear listeners, I don't think Alan. Maybe I'm not good at explaining the premise of a conversation I want to have, but I think Alan, or maybe Alan just likes to torment me and purposely drag the conversation into a different realm. But here's what I'll say, Alan. So Harry Potter, for example. I am unapologetic in my love for the books, especially the audio books. I think people are going to be reading these for centuries. And I love the slow rollout, and I love the subtlety of sometimes you'll be reading something, and one of our favorite things, Alan, you and I agree on this, they'll say, Ginny Weasley picked up a locket and put it over there. Okay, well, 2 books later, you find out that locket contains a part of Voldemort's soul. Spoiler. Right. That little thing was a huge thing, or Peter Pettigrew, or
somebody's pet rat. Yeah.
Right. And That's very satisfying. And in fact, I would even tie it into why I like Sherlock Holmes books, because when you first read a Sherlock Holmes book, you're trying to uncover a mystery, and it's really exciting sometimes when you get near the end of the story and you're like, ooh, I picked that up, or ooh, I'm very surprised by this answer or something.
I can be kind of content with that. Like, I could see the reasoning for that. I would also see that it's probably a lot more marketable on the part of like Disney or like Marvel in general, like to have the slow rollout, because it's like, hey, that's less arc ideas that we have to come up with, because it's like now after this multiverse thing, oh great, now we have to come up with another idea.
Yeah, well that's my thing, Max, because here's what I'm looking at. Okay, with Loki, and by the way, I guess we should tell you people, we're giving a few spoilers, but at the end of Loki, it's quite clear that in the very last episode, he winds up back in a different universe. He basically left, one universe and arrives at another.
Yes.
And then in the Watcher, it's not even in the What If. It's right out there. It's a multiverse. Well, I think what would be more interesting if you did the slow rollout thing is, what if you encounter a character and it's like this? There's something off about this person, or it's very subtle. And then 5, years later, you're like, oh, wow, that was a big deal. Killmonger was actually from Universe 8A instead of whatever other.
Okay,
So
all right.
I want more subtlety. I don't want to be beat over the head with.
Let's flip it over, and let's look at the size of the machine that you're talking about.
Okay.
All right. Back in the good old days that you are wistfully remembering, they did not have the machine. The massive production capability, the number of writers, the number of actors, the number of creative people moving these storylines forward. You were limping together what became the Juggernaut.
Okay.
All right. Well, today we have the Juggernaut. So it's big, and it's bad, and it's full, and you're getting a lot of side spice. Okay. What If is side spice. It's not canon, it's not this, it's not that, it's not whatever. It is exactly what it says it is. It's What If.
I don't know, Alan, because everything seems interconnected on Disney+.
Well, I understand. And the whole What If is the whole idea behind the multiverse, which is basically every comic book ever written ever. Because Peter Parker, until recently, has never managed to hit 30.
I guess.
Now he's an old guy in the Spider-Verse. Okay, yay! We finally had a character grow up. Keep in mind, comic book characters that we are watching on the screen now are basically the same age as they were in the 60s, in the 80s, in the 2000s. Welcome to the multiverse.
It's like The Simpsons. Like Bart does not stay out of get out of 4th grade
ever.
Right. I would love to hear what you think, dear listeners. Go to Geek Tank Radio, our Facebook page. Send us a message. Let us know what you think. I just think, give me some subtlety. I don't need the multiverse of madness, or Loki winding up in the multiverse, or What If, or I don't know. I want more subtlety. I want to be surprised, and I don't want you to just spoon feed me every plot line. So I've gotten it out of my system, Alan.
All right, you feel better.
We're gonna change gears when we come back. You're listening to a Geek Tank Radio here on News Talk 98.9, The Roar of Memphis. We're gonna take a quick break, and then we're gonna dive deep into Halloween month.
Geek Tank Radio.
Yeah! Oh, no!
News Talk 98.9, The Roar of Memphis.
And welcome back to Geek Tank Radio. I'm Joe Thorderson here with my friends Alan Gilbreth and our buddy Max behind the glass, and not Brandon. I guess I should stop throwing him under the bus, even though, I don't know, he could call in. He could do something. Alan, he's not contributing anything
He ain't giving
today.
you 3 thoughts, man. I'm just telling you.
You better be doubly entertaining next week, Brandon, when you get back. So I guess that's post-birthday for him, post-whatever. But although, like we said, his birthday, celebration lasts all month. Mm-hmm. But hey, Alan, I'm done whining about my beefs with What If. I can't promise I won't bring it up again as some of these new storylines, roll out, because I think What If, we've got one more episode of that, and by then Brandon will be back and we can see how they're handling their season cliffhanger. So, and one thing I would like to weigh in next week, Allan, just to give you the heads up, the Great British Baking Show is back.
Oh yeah,
boy,
I saw that.
And
you and I do totally agree on one show.
Oh, I think Brandon's in on that too.
Yeah,
I mean,
but you and Brandon agree on a lot more stuff than you and I agree on.
And we're not 95-year-old grandfathers, but somehow that show is just great. It works for everybody.
It just happens.
So,
it's a great show.
But Allan, we're here in the month of October, and as we said here on Geek Tank Radio, we don't apologize for this. This is the month. This is probably our month, right? I mean, this is a full month of Halloween celebration, not just the week before.
It's the long Halloween, the comic book.
Very good.
Ba-dum-bum.
So, hey, Allan, you've made some observations in the past, and a couple things. You talk about how the veil thins in the month of Halloween. We've also talked about how in October, I think whether you're a fan of Halloween or not, there is a universal feeling of you almost feel more alive in October. I don't know why. I guess it's probably a lot of factors. October is generally a very busy month emotionally, psychologically, and actually there's a lot of activities going on and a lot of sports.
If you live in a temperate zone, which most of us do, aka if you live in the tropics, you don't get a lot of visual change.
Now, San Diego, you were excited if you ever had to put a sweatshirt on. So
San Diego, oh, look, it's dry today.
Right.
Guess what it's going to be tomorrow.
Right.
It's going to be dry tomorrow. Right. So, all right, here's the biggest thing. When you hit October is a sensory overload month.
Oh, that's a good way of putting it.
All
the senses are stimulated.
It is truly, in every sense of the word, a sensualist month, and it's because of drastic visual change.
Yeah,
trees are changing color, spider webs. I mean, people kind of, we live in kind of a modern sprayed world, but let's back up in time just 50 years ago when we didn't, insecticide everything on the planet. Spider webs. Could you imagine walking through the Heath Rows and have literally every surface covered in some kind of tiny little spider web or cobweb in the fog?
There's a word, Heathrow. Very good, Allan.
Well, I periodically I do have to talk to my friends over on the other side of the pond.
Yeah.
So it's visually very stunning. The length of the day shortens. The temperature begins to drop. Everything is in full fruit.
New smells are emerging.
Quite literally, because it's also harvest season, I thought.
It is full-on harvest season, but also the sounds, because it is also, and we're going to have to get a little agricultural here for a moment, but the deer season, it's the rut. Mm-hmm. It's, the deer, you think about one of the great symbols of, the wild, a deer.
Right.
Their full antlers are in. I mean, if you want to look impressive, fall is when you look impressive. Yeah. Everybody's getting their winter coat. Everybody looks great.
You mentioned something too, Allan, because there is a sense of, in our old days, I don't want to say a sense of urgency, but it's kind of a sense of urgency because you're getting little glimmers of, okay, I better get prepared for the winter. If you were living in the old days, it's time to harvest. It's time to get ready to hunker in before the cold emerges. So there is a sense of urgency that comes in October.
There's a lot that has to be done, and the more work you get done now, and this is where a full moon comes in so important to a farmer, because with a big, nice full moon, you could keep working.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So you were out there in those fields bringing in the grains and the crops and the whatever it is that you had grown, you were getting as much of it as you could.
Yeah.
If you fished or hunted, it was time. If you're into clothing, October also marked an important beginning of the season because the animals began having better fur.
Oh, yeah, they're not shedding like they were all summer. So
everybody is getting a little fuzzier, it's kind of weird to think like this, but all right, ladies and gentlemen, clothing came from someplace. It doesn't necessarily come from the box store.
Right.
So you had to harvest the cottons and the linens, and you had to bring in those materials. But for all of the winter goods, most of those were animal products.
Sure.
So you wanted a good fox coat. You wanted a good, leather lining.
Yeah. So in the natural order of things, just that alone, we're in sensory overload. We're seeing nature changing gears, basically. We're seeing all sorts of a sense of urgency, all sorts of things like that. And then all of a sudden we start talking about how the veil thins. So you're setting the table for the big change.
I suppose this is sort of like a digression, but just sort of a personal query to with Allan. Like, how about fishing? Like, does the change in season apply to fishing and everything? Because I feel like water is a pretty consistent environment, but I'm not kind of speaking a little bit more ignorantly. Is this also a perfect time to kind of harvest, back in the day we talk about harvesting whale oil, or fishing season. Is this a more prime time compared to the other seasons?
Sir, you are dead on the money.
Aren't they going upstream now?
Well,
Is that when the
here we
bears
go.
are hunkering in?
Obviously, you've never seen a full salmon run.
Yeah.
Where an empty river or creek suddenly becomes so full of fish.
Yeah.
That how do you go fishing during this time of year? With a stick.
Yeah.
In a basket. You walk down there, you club it, you put it in the basket, and So when you see something like that, it is so easy to look at and go, we understand this time of the year is magical.
Sure. Yeah.
Because chestnuts, pecans, the nuts, everything's falling, blueberries are ripe. And we've talked about mushrooms several times. We can't forget the forest floor is now full of all kinds of edibles.
Oh, right.
Because you think about, you didn't go to the grocery store a couple hundred years ago. You got a basket and you walked out in the woods.
You went and hit the pecan tree.
You went and hit everything you could find.
Right.
So, yes, I'm going to look dead at Max and go, you are exactly correct. Because now not only was it the fish, but it was also pheasant season.
Yeah.
So the turkeys and the pheasants and all the wild animals were also bulking up and getting ready for the winter. So they're at their fattest. They are at their most delicious.
Yeah.
If you're going to get one, now's the time to do it.
While they're slow.
Yeah.
Well, and in the deer season, because they're distracted. Now
Right.
they're a little easier to get to. So welcome to all of these massive changes in a temperate zone. Yes, it is magical. The days are much more bearable. Also, it's not 110 degrees.
Yeah, you feel more active in October or something.
The nighttime temperatures are coming down. So, also you get into your tides.
Okay.
So if you get into your really big high and low tides based on your full moon, especially in the northern hemisphere, these are where the big tides are coming in. So you might be going out clamming. You might it's kind of weird, but for us to think this, but over in Europe, that whole bay that's been there all year may disappear tonight.
Yeah.
That whole bay will be completely empty for a few hours.
Oh, absolutely. So,
And then the water comes back.
yeah. And one more little note. If you're an observer, if you're an astronomer, the visibility is better when the weather gets cold. You can see
Less
the stars.
junk in the
There's more
atmosphere.
connection.
Yeah.
So we've set the table here. We've set what's going on in the natural order of things. But of course, Halloween is all about the spooky and All Hallows Eve. So celebrating the dead. So we're gonna talk about that. How the veil begins to thin in the month of October, right? So I mean, that's
Well,
it's
so
gets
easy to
interesting.
see how you would make the leap to the spiritual or the paranormal.
Right.
Because it's the perfect time of year for all of it.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. And so I think and it plays into a lot of these natural things we're talking about, and some of these themes we've already developed are what play into the Halloween traditions that we still have today. So there's a lot of things that go back to, hundreds of years. It's not just the 1940s when the candy companies came along.
That's right.
You're listening to Geek Tank Radio here on News Talk 98.9 The Roar of Memphis. We're going to take a quick break and continue our spooky discussion about the origins of Halloween.
Geek Tank Radio. News Talk 98.9, The Roar of Memphis.
And welcome back to Geek Tank Radio. I'm Joe Thorderson here with my buddy Allan Gilbreth and our pal Maximilian behind the glass. And not Brandon, and, whatever. He's not here. I'll get over it. You got double duty next week, Brandon. And if you've missed any of Geek Tank Radio, never fear. You can always go to geektankradio.com whenever Allan gets around to it and check out any of our past shows that he will post there eventually. No, and we have some things coming down the pipeline. We've got our SoundCloud. We just got to go ahead and repopulate that, Allan. We've got a lot of good material.
We actually have a lot of interesting things about to happen.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. And what's neat about the SoundCloud page for Geek Tank Radio is we can go way back. We can play the stuff we were doing 7 years ago. And stuff, and best of, and some of the characters we've got. So it's coming at you soon. One of the reasons we're a little behind, Allan, is because people in about 5 weeks is the Memphis Comic and Fantasy Convention. Maybe 6 weeks. I don't know if my math. 6 weeks.
You ain't got long.
Coming up November 12th through 14th. And I will tell you there's going to be some announcements probably this weekend. And this is a kind of a critical time to start paying attention. I'm going to just say we've probably got about 10% news that's, I would call it, not disappointing. It's news that you need to pay attention to, and about 90% of it is super exciting and very, very cool. So we're going to be announcing that very soon, like on our Facebook page and our website. So we encourage you to go to the Memphis Comic and Fantasy Convention Facebook page, join us there, and that way you can stay up on all the latest updates, and you can also learn more at memphiscfc.com, and of course go to the Geek Tank Radio Facebook page and follow us there. And Allan, I feel like, I know on Tool Talk we mentioned this a lot, but we need to give a shout out and a promotion for Geeky Side TV, because they're going to be heavily involved at the Memphis Comic and Fantasy Convention.
We have some of our Geeky Side TV celebrities will be present.
Yep.
I know for a fact that we have already booked Scott J. Carroll, the of strange comedic genius behind things like Under Review and Storytime.
Yeah, he's an iceberg, Allan. You walk by, you talk to Scott, and he's like, oh, he's a nice enough guy. And you get little glimmers, and then you watch his videos, and you're like, okay, this guy's really funny. And
there's a lot going
clever.
On here, yeah.
Yeah. He's going to be fun, and we're working him a lot during the convention.
Oh,
right?
I expect us to. So.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, so how do people check out Geeky Side TV?
All they need to do on their Roku television is go to the channel selector and find Geeky Side TV under the G's and just click subscribe. It's a free subscription, or they can just go with their computer or other computing devices and go to geekysidetv.com.
Absolutely. So, yeah, it's going to be fun. And, of course, people, rest assured, we are going to make this as fun but also as safe as possible. We're going to be following, CDC and Shelby County Health Department guidelines. It's, honestly, I think we're all used to this stuff by now. It's common sense.
We all kind of know it. Socially distance, wear your mask, get your vaccination, behave yourself. Yeah.
But I'll tell you, Allan, people are ready to party, man. Everybody's coming out of the woodwork. And I will say this, people, it's probably not a bad idea to go ahead and pre-register and get your tickets now, because I feel like the scuttlebutt I'm hearing, Allan, is a lot of conventions around the country, their attendance is way up, and we may, and you don't want the convention to sell out or, miss your chance to get in. So I would definitely go to memphiscfc.com, and that way, if you have your ticket, you're confirmed and you're in like Flint. So. All right, Allan, let's get back to our discussion. We talked about the veil thinning in the month of October, but tell us what that actually what does that mean to you when we're talking about that? Because it works on a lot of levels.
Well, we're wandering over into the Celtic traditions.
Oh,
and
that's my people.
Let's talk about your beloved people for a moment. It's 400 years ago, and you need a lantern. What are you going to do, Joe?
They don't have a big box store, right? So
you're not going to Lanterns Are Us.
Right.
No.
You're making it, huh?
Well, you're going to make one. So what are you going to make it out of?
Stop quizzing me. You tell me, Allan.
All right. The chances are your people sat around and went, that turnip is about the right size.
Okay.
And what you did.
I see where you're going.
Yeah. It even kind of had a handle on the top
Right.
and kind of a bell at the bottom, and you hollowed that centerpiece out, put your candle in there. A, it had moisture in it, so it didn't burn up. B,
That's
you
an
cut a
important
hole
factor.
in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you cut a hole in it, so now all the light projects forward, and you got a stalk on the top. So
I want to say something now, because you did make, because I don't know if we discussed this on Tool Talk, but people are, it's odd that you would stick a candle inside of a pumpkin, but you said it right there. There's moisture, so the thing's not going to just burst into flames.
bingo.
And so that's very important.
But that's one less pumpkin for Sven and his family.
Hey, man, that's the price you got to pay.
No, it is not. That is one slightly pre-cooked pumpkin when you arrive.
Oh,
Touché.
now there you go, because you got
Ooh.
the you took the seeds out. Hopefully you save those. You can roast those.
Right.
Those are tasty. And then okay, I see where you went, Alan. So you warm it up.
We waste nothing.
Okay.
So
people in the old days were not as wasteful as we are. That's
Oh
for
no!
sure.
Well, this tradition began basically with turnips.
Okay.
And as other fruits and veggies got roped in, we wound up with the jack-o'-lantern.
Okay, because I wanted
Now-
to get to the thinning veil, but now
we
we're
are
still-
there.
Now we're
We're
getting
there.
spooky.
Right. Well, exactly. I had to get you in the scene.
Right.
So here you are walking down the trail, knowing that the wildlife world is at its best.
They're looking for storing up.
Everybody's
for the winter.
looking for a free meal,
Right.
and you're walking along with your lantern. Now, picture what this person would have looked like walking down the trail.
Well, they probably got a cloak on, right?
They got a cloak on.
They got a lantern in front of them, so they're a
Wait,
shadowy
wait.
figure.
They have something that glows at the end of some kind of
Like a stick or
leafy handle. Basically, it looks like somebody walking down the trail with a glowing head in their hand.
Now
See,
we're talking.
There we go.
Oh yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So we got to get the scene right, because everybody has this lovely sanitized version, and it's not. It's this amazing spiritual looking event.
Well, and Alan, we're so used to our street lights and well-lit houses and buildings, but man, think of how many creepy shadows existed in the old days. You're coming
Right.
through a forest, you're already casting shadows through trees. You look like a ghost. It's neat. Yeah.
It's probably where you get certain stories, like with the hide behinds and everything. I'm sure Alan is very well versed in what a hide behind is.
Yeah, and
Doppelgangers and follow-alongs and will-o-wisp of
it's just ripe for that kind of thing.
Well,
and then you put on top of it the smell of dead leaves, the feeling of urgency that comes with October.
how many people actually have been out at like a farm or something and heard the rustling of something running through the leaves?
Oh yeah,
That
That'll
can be
freak you
very disconcerting if you don't know what's going on.
out. Yeah.
So, all right,
It's
we've
either a
set
squirrel
the
or a
stage.
bear.
It could be an armadillo. It
Yeah.
could be a squirrel. It could, in Europe, it could be a wild boar.
Sure.
In which case, best 2 falls out of 3, the loser is lunch.
Yeah.
So, all right, so we're going to be Celtic now for a minute, and we're going to be talking about the spirituality of the land.
Okay.
Because it is harvest season. It is taking from the land and giving back to the land, and it's the most prevalent time of year. So basically the idea is that the veil between the spiritual world and our world is thinnest at this point.
I wonder if it's because you're closer to death too.
Well, winter
You're more
is
vulnerable.
no,
Yeah.
you're exactly correct.
Yeah.
Hang on a second, Joe. You're actually dead on the money.
Yeah.
Because winter is the season of death.
Sure.
Nothing is growing. Everything's covered in snow or ice. So you're exactly on the money. This is just at that point. So that is why, as we change from the season of the plenty to, because really, honestly, we go from an embarrassment of riches to nothing.
Right.
Because
Right.
once that river freezes over, looking back at Max, you're done. You're not going back over there again.
No more clubbing
salmon.
fish with spears.
Yeah, nobody, So welcome to the thinning of the veil. This is the time of year when obviously the spirits of the land and the water and the animals and everything are the closest they can be to us, which also brings in human spirituality. So we must also be the closest to our ancestors.
Yeah. And there you go. All Hallows Eve, we're thinking of our ancestors past and everything. So, but Allan, before we get out of here, there's some really neat we're going to just touch on maybe one or two, but there's some really neat traditions that might be older than you think. Trick or treat did not come about in the 1940s, right? I mean, that's when they finally figured out how to avoid vandalism.
The candy was how to shut down the vandalism.
It's still a bribe. Regardless, trick or treat at its heart is supposed to be a bribe. So who were they bribing back in the old days?
Well, originally, the idea was to ward off the bad spirits to come. So winter's coming, the season of death. So people would dress in costumes, and they would have bonfires, and they would have these wonderful parties. And I am going to mention once again that alcohol plays a huge part in human history.
As it always does.
Because they weren't drinking Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
Dancing around the bonfire 300 years ago.
Right.
So I'm not going to say it added to the effect, but I'm going to say you can't discount it.
No.
So the idea here originally was to put up the bonfires, show the oncoming death season, that you weren't afraid of it, and we're warding it off. We're getting rid of the evil eye. We're getting rid of the bad ideas and the negativities.
That's a perfect word. That's a perfect place to leave it for the day, Allan. So welcome to the month of Halloween here on Geek Tank Radio. Death, we're not afraid of you. We're gonna plow headlong into it, but
or make friends with it.
Absolutely. But we're out of time. So on behalf of my friends, on behalf of my friends Allan Gilbreth and our pal Maximilian, and not Brandon because he wasn't here today. Thanks for listening to Geek Tank Radio. So until next week, I am Joe Thorderson.
And I'm Allan Gilbreth. And that is Maximilian over there wondering where all the fish went.